in terms of the structure of what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you some practical guidance about performance management, and then if you can bear with me through that, it's pretty dry. I'm also going to give you some case examples at the end which try and really highlight how it can really go wrong. That might bring you a bit more entertainment more than anything. Okay, good morning everybody. As I said, today I'll be speaking with you about performance management, which is a crucial process for maintaining effective, legal and compliant workplaces. Firstly, I thought I'd just talk about what performance management involves. So as some general key points, it's essentially the process of managing and addressing underperformance. This includes situations where employees fail to meet performance standards or do not comply with their workplace policies. It also includes unacceptable behaviour in the workplace or disruptive or negative behaviour that impact their co-workers. Recognising these early and taking a structured approach is vital for legal compliance and maintaining a positive workplace culture. The next thing I thought I'd talk about is some potential reasons for underperformance. These are just a few examples, especially from my experience managing people. A big one is an employee doesn't know what their job is. Doesn't know what's expected because their standards or the workplace policies and consequences are not drawn to their attention. They can also have personality differences with other employees. That's another regular occurrence. Employees not provided with the positive feedback or constructive criticism. So if an employee comes to you and says, if you want to talk to an employee and say you're not performing, you need to actually follow them up and say, give them reasons for that and to advise why, you've got that expectation and try and have a path forward. I address that a bit more later in the presentation. A poor work environment or culture, that was something that Des was really focusing on. There can be personal issues, family stress, poor health, etc., or also workplace bullying, which these days is a lot more common than you'd like it to be. So as leaders, we all need to try and respond to these things appropriately. The next thing I'm going to talk about is some possible ways that you can actually manage underperformance. The first obvious point is obviously identify the problem. Then you have to assess and analyse the problem and work out, how serious is it, and what are you going to try and do to deal with that moving forward, and how long has the problem been in place. My first suggested strategy is to meet with the employee to discuss the problem and advise them how it actually impacts on the workplace. You should, in terms of procedural fairness, you should allow the employee an opportunity to actually have a support person with them in the meeting so that they don't feel bullied, especially if there's more than one person on the employer's side. It's also important to really always focus on the problem and don't make it a personal thing with the employee. The next step is, if you possibly can, jointly devise a solution with the employee, because I find that this normally, if the employee finds that they've actually got a role in this discussion and they're actually a part of the process, to work with you to do things moving forward. That's not to say that can happen all the time. You may well have a real problem employee that just doesn't want to listen to you, in which case if they don't want to actively engage with you, it's important to still provide them with a detailed plan, setting out what you expect them to do, your expectations, and as detailed as you can so that they can actually follow a step-by-step process to improve their performance. Once you've actually then had that discussion and you've actually put that plan into place, you actually need to follow it up, because obviously that's, for you to track forward whether they actually are improving as you'd like and they can hopefully become a good employee, or if they're not following up and not actually performing as you like, then you can actually take next steps which may lead to the termination of their employment. If the performance doesn't improve, then there's a couple of steps that I suggest. You can either give them a final warning or what I call a show cause letter as well, which is effectively a letter that says that you've been doing X, Y, Z, you haven't improved within the timeline that I want. If you don't do this, you've got one final chance, otherwise you're looking at termination of your employment. Alrighty, so assuming for a minute that the employee doesn't improve their performance and you're looking at a termination. The termination is really the end of the line in performance management, and you have to ensure, for the purpose of the Fair Work Commission, because you don't really want to be facing unfair dismissal claims, that you've given them a fair go all round. Termination is all about the process as well. You've got to make sure you've ticked every box before terminating someone to ensure that the procedural fairness is provided. If you have to actually come to terminate an employee, you've normally got two notice options. You can either do it with notice, which is the general way to do things, which is either pursuant to a contract or the Fair Work Act, whatever's more favourable to the employee, or without notice in really serious cases for serious misconduct. So if somebody's stolen from you or assaulted somebody in the workplace, then you can terminate them immediately. Again, assuming you've actually given them a show cause letter or at least spoken to them about it before. The next thing I want to talk to you about is actually a common myth. The amount of times I've had people coming to me and say, oh, such and such has done this 3 times, can I terminate them? That's never been a thing. It might have been a thing in the olden days, I don't know, but for the last at least 15 years since I've been doing it, it's really not a thing. The nature of the conduct of the employee is the thing that governs the severity of the response. So for example, you might have to give somebody 20 written warnings, I'm just making up a number, for somebody who comes to work late or, is wearing the wrong dress or, something relatively minor, versus somebody who actually, assaults somebody in the workplace, is a bully or steals from you, then you can probably terminate them without notice. So it really is a matter of what has the employee done versus, the consequence has to actually match what's happened. Another pet hate that I have at the moment is that I've seen a number of employers who want to come to me and not actually have the tough conversations and actually say, oh, I want to make the employee redundant. A redundancy actually has cost of itself to the employer, so you actually, depending on how long the employee's been there, so that could also be expensive. So what I say is redundancy is fine if the employee's position is actually going to be redundant. If it's actually not needed anymore, that's perfectly fine and great. But it should not be an alternative to having a difficult conversation with the employee and actually managing them properly. All right, let's say we have terminated an employee and you've got a very upset employee doing that and they bring an unfair dismissal claim. So an employee has 21 days to bring an unfair dismissal claim from the termination of their employment. There are a couple of factors that they need to satisfy to be able to do that. So if you're an employer with less than 15 employees, you're a small business employer. So an employee has to be with you for at least 12 months before they can make a claim in that situation. If you've got 15 or more employees, they've only got to be with you for 6 months. So as long as they've met those characteristics, and also they have to be paid less than the high income threshold, which is currently 175 grand. That's indexed from the 1st of July every year. So I expect it's probably going to be 180, something similar to that. So if you're paid less than 180, you're okay. Or if you're paid more than 180, you've got to be employed pursuant to an enterprise agreement or a modern award. So if you're covered by that and over 180, you can still make the application. So the next point is for employees terminated prior to these periods, so for example, if you've got an employee less than 6 months, regardless of this employer size, they are sometimes attracted to what's called a general protections or adverse action claim. So this is not related to performance. This is where you can only make those types of claims for discrimination. For example, they say that they've made a complaint and then you've sacked them, or they've sacked you because you've got pregnant or something similar. It's really a discrimination claim is really what it is. If you can think of anything like that, age, sex, religion, all those sorts of things. So you really want to make sure that when you are actually talking to your employees and managing them, that it is really focused on the performance only and does not cross over into any type of discriminatory claim, or else you're going to have some problems. The remedies in the unfair dismissal claim, if they were to win, it's either reinstatement. That's pretty rare these days because normally when somebody's been sacked, it's for a reason, and typically the employee doesn't want to go back there anyway. Or if reinstatement's inappropriate, it's a maximum pay of 6 months' pay. But again, that's a very rare circumstance because that's almost a situation where you have sacked them because they're old or something like that. It's great because there's a lot of factors in there, because generally it's even if the employee is successful, the commission will really look at it and go, well, how have you contributed towards your termination? People typically these days don't terminate somebody just for no reason. So I'm now going to move into, I've got 4 case examples of things where employers have really done the wrong thing. So the first one is a case of Michelle de Leon and Spice Temple. So the employee was an employee of Rockpool Bar and Restaurant in Sydney. All these cases are from about between 5 and 10 years ago, but I still think they're pretty interesting. This employee had a conversation with a key customer. Unfortunately, the employee had a very poor telephone manner, and that resulted in a complaint with the customer. The employee was then actually summarily terminated the same day without warning or any notice of their misconduct. Went to the Fair Work Commission. The Commission held that the treatment of the employee was nothing short of appalling and manifestly unfair. It turns out that the owner directed the employee's manager to have a conversation in a meeting, but by that stage the decision had already been made, so they found that the meeting was a complete sham. It then turns out that the employee was never told the reason for that meeting, had no reasonable opportunity to respond to the allegations, no opportunity to have a support person, which, as I've said earlier, big no-no, not to provide any procedural fairness. The employee was shocked and distressed, yet was given no opportunity to compose herself or respond appropriately, not provide with any written warnings previously, or even a letter of termination saying you've been terminated for talking badly to a customer. In that case, they found that reinstatement was not appropriate, and she was actually about to go on maternity leave in another 12 weeks, so they ordered the compensation was that 12-week gap between when she was terminated and the time she was going to go on leave. So this is the first example of something where dismissals must be procedurally fair and properly documented. So this is one of my favourite cases. This is my Milo case. So this is an example of how investigations need to be fair and thorough. So in this case, the employee worked in the freezer section of an employer, and it was common ground that the employer would provide, Milo, coffee, that sort of thing in the morning tea room for these staff to use. The employee regularly took the Milo home to prepare his own mix and bring it into work. The employer wasn't aware of that, so they've actually had a security guard there, and the security guard actually came to the employee one day and said, "I'm going to search you, please." And so he's obviously very shocked, but then he found out that he found the Milo in the guy's backpack. And so the employee then said, I've brought that from home. There was then an investigation, and they found out that in fact he lied. He admitted the lie, and he said he was just so shocked by being that being investigated about the Milo that he lied about it. And so he was summarily dismissed. Went to the commission, and then they said that there was actually no reason for the termination, and the employee's shocked and confused state really contributed to his inconsistent responses. So he then was reinstated and was fully compensated for his losses in the meantime. So don't sack people for taking their Milo home, please. My third example, so there's a little bit of colourful language in this one, I apologise in advance. In May 2013, a senior manager of a building company copied all staff into an email to the CEO/sole director congratulating him on his 20 years of service and telling him that his reward was his own Lamborghini that was sitting in the car park. Then there was another employee who responded, in this case to the communication with the staff. The email attached a mock resume for the CEO that the employee had copied from the internet, which contained a list of hobbies and interests that included a reference to excessive masturbation. As a result, the employee was summarily dismissed without being an opportunity to respond. He'd been there for 6 years, which is actually a factor. So he ended up bringing the unfair dismissal application. He also said that because of it was a building site, a building company, that this was a culture of the place, this sort of conduct was okay, apparently. The Commission found that although calling an employee a wanker would be misconduct, in this situation, given that it was intended as a joke, and given the workplace culture, it did not provide a valid reason for dismissal. So we actually got the maximum of $62,000 at the time. So, yeah. The last one I actually think is the worst example that I've actually come across in my time. The general manager of a Chinese language radio station was dismissed due to her religion. The employer even confirmed with the employee that the reason was not for performance, not a financial reason, not a relationship reason, your religion. Unsurprisingly, the Commission found that there was no valid reason for the employee's dismissal, and they awarded the employee 6 months' pay. The Commission also went on to say that as well as being unfair, the treatment was discriminatory. It really probably should have been reported to the Fair Work Ombudsman, but they stopped short of that. But it really could have opened up a general protections or discrimination claim as well, because that's horrific. Okay, so after my presentation today and those cases, there's a couple of key lessons hopefully you guys can take out of it. Employers should ensure that they have appropriate plans and policies and processes in place to manage alleged misconduct, ensure that they enforce those policies. Further, failure to follow appropriate policies and procedures and failure to provide the procedural fairness can result in employers having to face orders of reinstatement or significant compensation. In other words, the process matters as much as the performance itself. Whoops. Okay. In closing, performance management is a balancing act between supporting staff to improve and protecting your business from risk. It's very important that you all implement fair, clear and structured processes to manage your staff for legal process and for your own protection. If you've got any questions, I'll talk in the Q&A.